everyone, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive, and you know me, I love a good deep dive.
Yeah.
And this one's all about productivity. So buckle up because we're gonna get things done.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so you know how it is, right? We're all busy. We're all trying to figure out how to do more in less time. And you sent over a ton of great resources for this deep dive. We've got that Forbes article by Dr. Samantha Manhusing, right? The one with all the tips for busy leader.
Yeah, that one's packed with good stuff.
It is. And then there's that really thought-provoking piece on Medium by Carl Jeffers.
Oh, yeah. Jeffers always makes you think.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then we've got this massive list of like 30 hacks from Simply Learn.
30. It's a lot to unpack.
It is. So what we're going to do today is sift through all this advice and see what really stands out. The stuff that we can actually use to make a difference.
Sounds like a plan.
Awesome. So the first thing that really jumped out at me was from Carl Jeffers. He says that all the productivity tips in the world won't help if you don't believe you can actually be more productive.
That's so true. It's like you have to have that foundation of belief.
Right. Like if you're going into it thinking, oh, this is never going to work for me, well then, yeah, it probably won't.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Totally. And I know I've been there. You know those days where you just feel so swamped that you're like, I can't even deal with this right now?
I think everyone's been there.
But then there are other times when I feel like I'm in the zone, you know, like I can conquer anything. And it's amazing how much of a difference mindset makes.
It really does. Mindset is everything.
So true. Okay, so building on that foundation of belief, let's talk about some practical strategies. Dr. Matt Hosing makes a great point about delegation.
Yeah, delegation is huge.
It is, but it's something that a lot of leaders struggle with.
It's true. We often fall into the trap of thinking we have to do everything ourselves.
Like if we don't do it, it won't get done right.
Right, or it won't get done the right way.
Exactly. But that can lead to burnout. So
Wow.
How do we get better at delegating?
Well, both Dr. Manhusing and that Simply Learn article talk about this tool called the Eisenhower Matrix. Have you heard of that?
I've seen it. But I have to admit, I sometimes get lost in trying to figure out which quadrant a task belongs to.
It can be a little confusing at first, but it's actually really helpful.
So how does it work? Remind me.
Basically, you categorize your tasks based on urgency and importance. So there are 4 quadrants.
Okay.
First, you've got the urgent and important stuff. Those are the things you need to do right now. No question.
And firefighting mode.
Exactly. Then there's the important but not urgent stuff.
Like strategic planning or professional development.
Yes. Those are the things you want to schedule for later.
Okay. What about the urgent but not important stuff?
Those are the tasks that are perfect for delegating. Someone else can handle them.
That makes a lot of sense. What about the last quadrant?
The not urgent and not important stuff, those are the time wasters.
Okay, so those are the things we should just eliminate altogether. Wow, I like this. I'm already seeing how this could be helpful. So think about your own work. Are there any tasks you're doing that could either be delegated to someone else or eliminated completely using this matrix?
Definitely. Think about your to-do list. Is there anything on there that's really not that important? And could someone else do it just as well?
You know what? That weekly report I spend hours on every Friday. That could probably be handled by someone else.
There you go. See?
Yeah.
You're already getting it.
And all those meeting requests that aren't really related to my core projects, I think I need to start saying no to more of those.
Saying no is another key productivity hack.
It is, but it can be so hard.
I know. Especially if you're a people pleaser.
Yeah. But every time I do say no to something that's not a good use of my time, it feels great.
It's like you're taking back control of your schedule.
Totally. Okay. There's one tip that I always love talking about, the 2-minute rule.
Ah, yes. A classic.
If a task takes less than 2 minutes, just do it now. Don't overthink it. Get it off your plate.
It's about eliminating that mental clutter.
Right. Like imagine you have a quick email to send. Do you let it linger in your inbox or do you just knock it out in 2 minutes?
Sometimes the smallest tasks can take up the most mental space.
So true. Okay. So we've got mindset. We've got delegation. We've got the power of no. What else is on our productivity hit list?
Well, all 3 sources talk about the importance of minimizing distractions.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
It's the battle of our time.
Right.
Everywhere you turn, There's something vying for your attention.
Website blockers, email notifications, social media. It's exhausting.
It really is. But there are strategies for managing all of that.
Like what?
Well, Simple Learn recommends using website blockers to literally prevent yourself from going down those internet rabbit holes.
I've heard of those but never tried one. Do they really work?
They can be really effective for some people. It's like taking away the temptation altogether.
Interesting.
Now, Dr. Matt Hosing offers a slightly different approach.
Yeah.
She suggests designating specific distraction time throughout your workday.
So instead of constantly fighting the urge to check your phone, you just allow yourself to do it at certain times.
Exactly. You're basically scheduling it in.
That's actually a really good idea.
And then Simply Learn suggests something similar with email, limiting your checks to specific times instead of constantly being bombarded by new messages.
That makes a lot of sense. Instead of constantly switching between tasks, you create more of a focused flow.
Exactly. And that leads us to another concept that Simply Learn highlights, working in short bursts.
Like the Pomodoro technique.
Yes, exactly. Imagine a timer ticking away for 25 minutes. You're completely focused on a single task, knowing that a break is coming.
I've tried the Pomodoro technique before, but I haven't quite found a rhythm with it.
It takes some practice, but a lot of people find it really helpful.
So it's more about finding a structure that allows you to work with rather than against your natural energy levels.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered mindset delegation, the power of no managing distractions and working in bursts. What other productivity gems did we uncover from these articles?
Well, this one might surprise you. Simply Learn suggests using red and blue colors in your workspace.
Wait, what colors can impact productivity?
Apparently so. There's some research to back it up. Red is thought to enhance attention to detail, while blue is linked to creativity.
That's so interesting. I'm going to have to look into that.
Me too. It's a good reminder that sometimes the smallest things can make a difference.
Okay, so red and blue. What else?
Simply Learn also stresses the importance of having a dedicated workspace, especially for those of us working remotely.
That makes sense. When your home is also your office, it can be hard to separate work life from personal life.
Exactly. Having a dedicated workspace helps you mentally shift into work mode
Yeah.
and be more present and focused.
Okay. So environment matters. What else did these articles highlight?
Well, something that really resonated with me was the emphasis on self-care.
Yeah, I saw that too, especially in the Simply Learn article.
It's easy to think of self-care as a luxury, but it's actually essential for sustained productivity.
I love that they suggest scheduling self-care activities into your week, like you would any other important appointment.
It's about making it a priority,
What are some activities you find helpful for recharging?
honestly. Sometimes just giving myself permission to unplug and take a break makes a huge difference.
Same here. Sometimes I go for a walk outside. Sometimes I curl up with a good book. What about you? How do you prioritize self-care?
I'm a big believer in the power of nature. For me, a long hike or even just a few minutes in the garden helps me clear my head and come back feeling refreshed.
That sounds amazing. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different tactics. We've got mindset delegation, the power of no managing distractions, working in bursts, and creating an environment that supports focus and well-being. But with all this advice, where should our listener actually begin?
It can feel overwhelming to try to implement everything at once, right?
Totally can.
So the key is to find what resonates with you. Don't feel like you have to do it all.
Right.
Choose one or two things that really speak to you and commit to trying them for a week. See how they impact your productivity and your overall well-being.
So maybe it's something as simple as the 2-minute rule.
Exactly.
Or maybe it's creating a dedicated workspace. Or maybe it's finally blocking those distracting websites, you spend way too much time on.
The important thing is to start small edition. Experiment and find what works best for you. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to productivity.
So true. It's about finding what helps you feel more in control, less stressed, and more able to focus on the things that truly matter.
Exactly.
That's such a great point. Before we wrap up this first part, there's one more technique I wanted to touch on. Dr. Medhosa mentions this brain dump exercise, which sounds like a great way to declutter your mind and get everything out on paper. Have you ever tried this?
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of brain dumps.
Really? Tell me about it.
It's amazing how much lighter I feel after getting all those swirling thoughts out of my head and onto paper.
It's like a mental detox.
It really is. And once you have everything written down, you can start to prioritize those thoughts and tasks. Maybe even using that Eisenhower matrix we discussed earlier.
I love how all these techniques can work together. It's like building a personalized productivity toolkit.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
And remember, there's no need to strive for perfection.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
about making gradual progress and finding what works best for you.
Awesome. So before we move on to the next part, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The idea of clarity. It wasn't explicitly mentioned in any of the articles, but as we were preparing for this deep dive, it struck me that even with all these amazing tips and strategies, the most important factor in productivity might just be clarity about what truly matters to you.
That's so true.
Yeah.
When you're clear about your values, your goals, your priorities,
Mm-hmm.
everything else falls into place.
It's like having that North Star to guide your decisions about how you spend your time and energy.
Exactly.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in the busyness of life and work. But if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, it's hard to stay motivated and productive. So, in addition to experimenting with these productivity hacks, I think it's so important to take some time to reflect on what truly matters to you.
Absolutely.
What are your non negotiables? What are the things that bring you joy and fulfillment?
Once you have that clarity,
Mm.
you can start to design your life and your work in a way that reflects those values.
It's about creating a life that feels both productive and meaningful.
Exactly. And I think that's a great segue into our next part where we'll delve even deeper into some specific strategies for aligning your actions with your values.
Awesome. I can't wait. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
You know, it's funny, you mentioned clarity,
Mm.
and that ties in perfectly with something else we wanted to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
What's that?
It's this idea of time blocking. Have you ever tried that?
I have. I've dabbled with it, but I haven't been super consistent. Honestly, I get a little intimidated by the idea of planning out every hour of my day.
I get that. It can feel a bit rigid at first, but it doesn't have to be that way.
So, how do you approach time blocking? For me, it's less about creating a minute by minute schedule and more about setting aside chunks of time for specific types of tasks.
Okay, so like instead of saying, I'm going to rate this report from 9 to 11,
Yeah,
you might say, I'm going to focus on deep work for 2 hours this morning.
exactly. And within that 2 hour block, you can be flexible. You might work on the report, or you might tackle another important task that requires deep focus.
That makes sense. So it's more about creating those containers for different types of work
Right. And it also helps you be more intentional about how you're spending your time.
instead of just reacting to whatever comes up in your inbox.
Exactly. You're proactively deciding how you want to use your time.
I like that. Okay, so we've got time blocking. What other time management strategies did we uncover?
Well, one that I found really interesting was this concept of batching.
Batching. What's that?
It's the idea of grouping similar tasks together and doing them all at once.
Okay, so instead of checking email throughout the day, you might set aside 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon to process your inbox.
Exactly. Or instead of jumping back and forth between writing and editing, you might batch all your writing tasks together and then all your editing tasks.
That makes sense. I can see how that would be more efficient.
It is. And it also helps you get into a flow state.
Right. Because when you're constantly switching between tasks, it takes time to reorient yourself.
Exactly. You lose that momentum.
Okay. So we've got time blocking, batching. Any other time management tips?
Well, this one's a bit more of a mindset shift, but it's really powerful.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's the idea of Parkinson's law. Have you heard of that?
I have. It's something about work expanding to fill the time available, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you give yourself a week to complete a task,
Right.
it will probably take you a week. But if you give yourself 2 days,
It might only take 2 days.
exactly. So it's about setting realistic but challenging deadlines for yourself.
And then sticking to them.
Right. Because when you have a deadline looming, it forces you to focus and prioritize.
I'm definitely guilty of giving myself too much time for things.
I think we all are. It's human nature.
Okay, so Parkinson's law. Got it. What else?
Well, this one might seem obvious, but it's often overlooked.
What's that?
The importance of taking breaks.
It's easy to get so caught up in work that we forget to take breaks.
It's true, but those breaks are essential for recharging and coming back to your work with fresh eyes.
They say that stepping away from a problem can actually help you solve it.
Absolutely. Sometimes the best ideas come when you're not even trying to think about the problem.
So we need to give ourselves permission to step away from our desks and clear our heads.
Right. And those breaks don't have to be long. Even just 5 or 10 minutes can make a difference.
So maybe a quick walk around the block or a few minutes of meditation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whatever helps you relax and de-stress.
Okay. So breaks are important. What else?
Well, remember how we were talking about environment earlier?
Yeah, like the red and blue colors.
Exactly. Well, beyond just colors, there are other things you can do to create a workspace that supports productivity.
Like what?
Well, for one, make sure you have a comfortable chair.
That's a good one. I've definitely been guilty of working from the couch for too long.
It's tempting,
Hmm.
but it's not good for your back or your productivity.
So invest in a good chair. What else?
And good lighting.
Right. Because if you're straining to see, it's going to drain your energy.
Exactly. And then think about things like plants or artwork.
Those can make a big difference in creating a space that feels inspiring.
Absolutely. Your workspace should be a place where you feel energized and motivated to work.
Okay. So comfortable chair, good lighting, inspiring decor. What else?
Well, this one might sound a bit out there, but some people swear by it.
I'm all ears.
Listening to certain types of music.
Like what kind of music?
Well, some people find that classical music or nature sounds can help them focus.
Interesting. I've definitely heard of that. I actually have a playlist of ambient music that I like to listen to when I'm writing.
See, it works for you.
It does. It helps me drown out the distractions and get into a flow state.
Exactly. So experiment with different types of music and see what works best for you.
Okay, so music environment breaks Parkinson's law batching time blocking. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. It's been a really productive conversation.
It has. And I think the key takeaway here is that there's no one size fits all approach to productivity.
Right. What works for one person might not work for another.
So it's about experimenting with different strategies and finding what works best for you.
Exactly. And it's also about being kind to yourself.
Because productivity isn't about being perfect.
It's about making progress and feeling good about the work you're doing.
And enjoying the journey along the way.
Exactly. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
I agree. But before we do, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
You know, we've talked about all these different productivity hacks and strategies, but at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is to remember why we're doing all of this.
What do you mean?
I mean, why are we so focused on productivity? What's the ultimate goal?
To get more done, to be more efficient.
Yes, but I think it goes deeper than that. I think it's about creating a life that we love, a life that feels meaningful and fulfilling.
You're right. Productivity is just a tool. It's a means to an end.
Exactly. And that end is whatever we define it to be.
So it's not just about getting things done. It's about getting the right things done, the things that matter to us.
Exactly. And it's about doing those things in a way that feels good, that doesn't burn us out, that allows us to enjoy the journey.
I love that. So it's not just about productivity. It's about living a good life.
Yes. And using productivity as a tool to help us create that life.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think we're done.
I agree. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to all our listeners out there, we hope you found this conversation helpful. And we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, your favorite productivity hacks, or even just a quick hello in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep. It's so easy to get caught up in chasing productivity and forgetting the bigger picture, you know?
Totally. It's like we get so focused on the doing that we lose sight of the why.
Exactly. And that's where I think that clarity piece comes in, really being clear about what matters most to you.
Yeah. Because when you know what your priorities are, it's easier to make decisions about how you spend your time.
And your energy.
Exactly. And that's what ultimately leads to a feeling of fulfillment.
Right. It's not just about being productive, it's about being productive in a way that aligns with your values.
So true. So I guess the question is, how do we find that clarity?
That's a great question. And I don't think there's a single answer. But I think it starts with being willing to ask ourselves some tough questions.
Like what?
Like, what are your non negotiables? You know? What are the things you absolutely will not compromise on?
And what are the things that bring you joy, that make you feel alive?
Exactly. Because when you're clear about those things, it becomes easier to say no to the things that don't matter.
And to say yes to the things that do.
Right. And that's where all those productivity hacks and strategies we talked about can really come in handy.
They become tools to help you create the life you want.
Instead of just being ways to get more done.
Exactly. It's about using those tools in a way that supports your values and your goals.
I love that. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought.
All ears.
Productivity is not the end goal, it's a means to an end. And that end is a life that feels good, a life that feels meaningful and fulfilling.
So well said.
Yeah.
And it's up to each of us to define what that looks like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So take some time to reflect on what truly matters to you. And then use these productivity strategies to help you create a life that you love, a life that's both productive and purposeful.
That's a great message to end on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it helpful. And remember, the most important thing is to be kind to yourself. Experiment with different approaches and find what works best for you.
And don't forget to have fun along the way.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.